Hello, and welcome to another episode of Muview with Mo. I'm Morrison Nolan, and today we're going to do something a little bit different. We're branching out from the field of geology, geobiology, paleontology, and into the realm of physics and material science. And today I would like to introduce my friend, the newly minted Master of Science, Jack Monk.
Thanks for having me, Morrison. Pleasure to talk to you.
Yeah, yeah.
So
Well,
I,
it's good to have you on, and I think it's always kind of nice to explain to people how we know each other, and I'd say we are friends through a D&D group.
yes,
Yeah.
yes, we do nerdy things together. In case people couldn't figure out that about you, but you know everyone, and then I just maneuvered my way into your inner circle. So
you
biding my
you
time.
you run into interesting people in all sorts of walks of life.
You do, and it's always nice. It's always nice to figure it out. Before I met you, I knew nothing about rocks. Now I know some things about rocks.
So just to kind of, so I got to listen to your defense, and to poorly summarize it,
Okay.
my understanding of it is that you are doing experiments on looking at the density and size of quantum dots in the structures that produce laser signals in order to try to increase the amount of information that you can send through fiber optic communication systems.
Yeah, not bad. Honestly, I'm doing theoretical work is
Mhm.
my thing. So my work was on, and this is the big title, semiconductor quantum dot lasers with asymmetric barrier layers. So I know that was a lot, but so pretty much my research was on looking at a new design of semiconductor quantum dot lasers in order to increase bandwidth and increase the amount of information that's able to be transferred, just like you said. So you weren't that far off. So you did pay attention. Well done.
And for the benefit of the audience, namely me, could
Okay.
you explain briefly what a quantum dot is?
Okay. So fair warning, quantum physics. All right. So if you pick up a cube in front of you, there's three dimensions, right? We can move in three dimensions, all right? Not counting time, which Einstein said was the fourth dimension, but that's not what we're getting into. If you're in your room, you can move in three dimensions, all right? You can go forward and backward, left and right, and you can jump up and down, okay? So the same thing happens with particles, where they have, because with quantum particle wave duality, which means that that light is a particle and also a wave, because physics, your light particle is able to bounce around wherever it wants to in your room. All right. So what a quantum dot is we take your bedroom and we say that you're a photon, you're a light particle, and we are going to squeeze two walls of your bedroom so close together that you can't move left to right. All right, so in quantum physics land, this means that you make the width, let's say, less than the wavelength of your light particle.
Okay.
Okay, so that way, if your room is closed off on your shoulders, you can only move forward, backward, and jump up and down. So now you only have 2 degrees, 2 dimensions of freedom. So in a quantum dot, what you're doing is you are shrinking the entire room until you have 0 degrees of freedom. So pretty much you've just made a artificial atom. So we can use these for a lot of really interesting things based off of how large the quantum dots are. They emit different wavelengths of light. I think Samsung is trying to make a TV out of quantum dots. Where they're just going to layer a bunch of quantum dots as RGB, and the main complaint is that it's really expensive, and the human eye can't tell how small and minuscule the detail is. Yeah, so a quantum dot is pretty much just you take a photon and you trap it so it has nowhere to go.
Okay.
And you have an artificial atom.
And just to think about that from a physical material sense, would you make that by like having a semiconductor that you're starting off with, and then you introduce some other element material in strategic locations within that has a particular electronic structure that allows you to make those limiting factors, or what physically
Yeah, good
would you
question.
make a quantum dot out
Yeah.
of?
So you can make quantum dots separately from these semiconductor devices.
Mhm.
There's actually, if you Google it, there's quite a few images of quantum dots in test tubes that make the tubes glow, and it looks really pretty.
Oh.
But so in my research in the semiconductor quantum dot lasers, what you do is semiconductors have two sides, all right? So there's the N side that has a lot of extra electrons in it, and then you have the hole side, which has a lot of holes where electrons would go, which we call, they're pretty much the opposite of electrons. They are positive particles that cancel out with electrons so that you can keep charge neutrality. They don't really exist, but you have to think about them.
Hmm.
It's fun. So what you're doing is when you're making these semiconductor quantum dot lasers, uh, you grow one half of it, and then right when you get to the point where you want to have the quantum dots, you switch over and you grow the quantum dots where you want. You switch materials. Quantum dots can be made in a bunch of different materials, very strange blends depending on what you need them to work. A lot of research is being done in St. Petersburg about indium gallium arsenide, I believe, is the material that they use.
I have some vague memories of listening to some talks about micro lamination depositing of that in electronic systems that I listened to back in my undergrad
Yeah,
chemistry program.
yeah, pretty much like that. But that's the right way to think about it. That's the right way to think about it, is where you're depositing this material in waves. So like think about how a 3D printer works,
Hmm.
where you're just slowly building up. That's the exact same thing of how you make these devices.
Cool, cool. Well, thanks for that little summary of some of your main work. But now I'd like to talk about your backstory, kind of where
Sure.
you grew up, where you came from, and how you developed an interest in the field that you now work in.
Okay, so I grew up all my life between in the exact middle between Baltimore, Maryland, and Washington D.C.
Sounds like a lot of traffic and a lot of toll roads.
God, it's too much, man. All right, I hate 495 with a burning passion. All right, but yeah. So I grew up there. My parents were always very supportive of the sciences. I was definitely a Legos kid.
Hmm.
Just everybody knows Legos are the best thing ever.
Yeah.
But so definitely was raised to like science. Took an interest in music and tuba, and then I got diagnosed with Crohn's disease when I was about 13. And my father did some great tough love that was necessary. He sat me down and he was like, "With the state of America and your health, you cannot afford to be an itinerant tuba player." And like it was tough love at the time, but it was the exact thing, because I would never have been able to get off my parents'
Yeah.
paycheck that way. You know, I had to have a good job, I had to have good rent. So I ended up really enjoying physics, and really enjoying engineering. So I eventually went to Virginia Tech to get my undergrad degree in physics. And I thought I wanted to get a PhD in physics,
Mhm.
but quickly realized that academia is not my calling. I was ready to get on to the real world. And there's a problem with physics where a lot of times without the PhD, you can't get a job in research capacity.
Yeah.
A lot of people will just go, "Oh, why didn't you get the PhD? Like, what went wrong? What happened?" So there's that stigmatism within there. So I decided to abandon ship and betray all of my friends, and I went to material science and engineering. So I have been a physicist hiding in the material science department, doing quantum and solving Schrodinger's equation a whole bunch while not knowing a lick about material science. So yeah,
Yeah, the joys of getting to do all sorts of math where you have a preponderance of letters that
Yep.
yeah,
Yeah. I, I
and
am.
these are
I am.
like not the normal Greek and Latinate alphabet too,
Oh
but
no.
they're
Oh
really
no.
kind
You
of
get
big.
really creative in there.
Yeah.
Have you ever tried writing a paper and you can't find the symbol for your math in Word?
I have always felt that the special symbol feature in Word desperately needs a search function. I don't understand
Desperate.
why it doesn't have one.
There's a unit. There's like a four digit number that you can type in, and it'll bring up an individual. Like if you want lambda, lambda's code might
Oh,
be
like
like
the
oh one
Unicode?
oh three. Yeah, yeah, but you have to know the code,
Yeah.
so it's not helpful at
Yeah,
all.
like why can't you just search Lambda? It seems like it would be so easy for them to have some sort of index for that,
Yeah, it's
but I'm not Bill Gates, so what do I know about Microsoft Word?
yeah, it's. But yeah, so I've been a physicist hiding in the material science department for the last 2 years. I'm the worst material scientist I know, but I can math them all under the table.
Math's
So
very important for physics and material science.
math is very important. Full stop. All
Mm,
right, we all have to pay our taxes.
yeah. This is
So
kind of backtracking to the symbol thing, but I often feel that science and mathematics are kind of too reliant on the Greek and Latin alphabet, and you end up with having the same symbol
mhm.
represent a huge number of very separate concepts that in theory you shouldn't get confused because of the field, but when you're like an undergrad or a high school student that's getting introduced to these things, you deal with alpha being like 8 different concepts.
Yep.
We have
Mhm.
an entire world of symbology that's very easy to get on, and I don't understand, like, we can make these complex emoticons out of obscure Japanese characters that are not that uh, scripturally
Yeah. Mhm.
complex to draw. Why can't we incorporate that into our mathematical and scientific equation vernacular?
Yeah. I
That
specifically remember.
would make things clearer.
Yeah, I specifically remember taking undergrad um, undergrad ESM, and capital E was electric field. But in the advanced version of electrophysics, capital E was not electric field, it was capital F. And capital E meant something completely different and confused the heck out of everybody. So yeah, you gotta be tricky. You gotta be careful. Sometimes it just doesn't line up, but
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. Well, one thing that I like talking about in this podcast are the museums that we love and that we've grown up with. Are there any museums, natural history museums, or art museums that you're particularly fond of and that you found yourself visiting a lot?
Well, the Smithsonian
It's
in
nice living
general.
near those, isn't it?
Yeah, I was when we were very little. My mother and her friend would put all of the kids in a stroller and hop on the metro and take us to the Smithsonian every summer. So I had plenty of time around museums growing up. My favorites are probably the Air and Space Museum, just because that's incredibly interesting. Just
Mhm.
seeing everything there. Um, and here's one that you might not have heard of, Morrison, but is definitely one that you should go and visit because it's just a fun day. The National Spy Museum.
The National Spy Museum.
I believe it was just moved to a larger location, but it's in Washington, D.C., and it is about the history of spying.
Interesting, interesting.
And it talks about cryptography. It talks about like big operation, like what did spying look like in World War II? What
Mhm.
did spying look like in the Cold War? It's a very interesting one to visit, even if you have no background. It's a very cool museum, and I definitely wanted to bring that one up.
Kind of building on that, I recommend both to you and to our listeners the excellent book Double Cross, which is an interesting history of British spycraft during World War II, involving some very colorful historical characters and events.
Hmm,
Yeah.
I'll have to check that out.
Yeah, it's very entertaining. There's a couple of individual people who are very colorful in and of themselves, getting up to unusual shenanigans, like the British attempted pigeon counterintelligence, they were trying to compromise the German carrier pigeon routes. They succeeded in
Okay.
compromising it, but the Germans never realized they had been compromised, which the British had wanted them to be aware that they had been compromised, is to interfere with their information routes. And so it was some interesting spy versus spy, where the other spy never realized they got spied.
See, everybody talks about the Turing and everything,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
they never mention the pigeons.
The pigeon counterintelligence.
Yeah, they never mention stuff like that, and that's what's really interesting is what humans will think of as a way to mess with other humans.
Yeah, and Double Cross has the story of that and a number of other interesting interludes from the history of World War II spycraft.
Hmm.
But
I'll have to check it out.
going back to Air and Space Museums, by any chance, have you ever been to Niagara Falls?
I have not. I was going to go this summer, but Corona, so that didn't happen.
When you
But
do
I
get
am not.
when you do get to go on the American side of the falls, it used to be kind of right near the falls, but now it's subsequently moved and is not a terrible far drive away. It's still in the greater Buffalo area, but
Yeah.
there is a Bell Aircraft Museum where they show the history of Bell aircrafts, and they have a lot of like early, very spindly looking helicopters and interesting historical aircraft.
Oh, that would be cool.
Yeah, yeah, it's neat. I visited there a couple of years ago. I got to visit their previous location, which was very near the falls, and I saw their new location, but unfortunately on the day that I was there, they were closed, so I didn't get
Oh,
to.
so you didn't get to check out as much as you would have liked.
Yeah, yeah,
Ah, that's a bummer.
yeah. Are there any museums that you hope to go to at some point?
That one. That, that one sounds interesting. There was, oh shoot, there was another one that there's the, just going to my more nerdy side, there is a museum in Seattle, Washington. It's the Pop Culture Museum.
Ooh.
And it is a multiple story. It's the building's architecture is also very interesting, if I remember correctly, but it is the history of pop culture in America.
Interesting.
And yeah, it talks about like the history of comic books, like when did comic books get started, and then it talks about like when did video games get started. That seems very interesting to me. Another one that I want to go to is the Mount Rainier museum at the foot of Mount Rainier. So there's one at the foot of Mount St. Helens that I went to after I climbed Mount St. Helens, and
I've also climbed Mount St. Helens.
Hey, I hate Scream, man.
Yeah, it's for those of you who've not climbed Mount St. Helens, it's not the longest hike, but the middle third of it you do a little bit of bouldering in an area where there's not a lot of trail marking other than up, and then the final third of it is entire a section of ash scree where like you take a step, and every step you take, your foot sinks in and slides about half a step back.
Yeah, it's a little grueling at the end, and it gets all in your shoes. You will walk out with a canister.
The whole hike is, I think, only about 7 miles from like base to top and back.
Yeah, from base camp it's 7 miles. Yeah.
I went on a 14-mile gradual grade mountain hike once, and I can say with absolute certainty that the Mount St. Helens hike was much more than 4 times as strenuous and difficult as that 14 miles.
It's the scree, man. It's the scree.
It just takes it out of you.
Just when you have to lift your foot out of 3 inches of ash every single step, and you just step and you just feel yourself move back with the 70-pound pack with all your stuff. You're like, oh.
It's totally worth it, though. I mean, it's a great view at the top, and it's, of course, obviously quite geologically interesting.
I saw nothing at the top. It was the clouds came in just as we went to the top. There's a picture of me standing triumphant, and it could have been taken in a parking lot, man. You can't tell what is going on.
I was lucky. The weather was pretty agreeable when I was there, so I got to take advantage of the good views and enjoy a very pleasant lunch at the top of the mountain.
Oh, yeah. I want to do Rainier eventually. Nice. That's on my list. And the mountains usually have pretty interesting museums and things around them. So the lava tunnels,
are
one to check out.
I didn't get to see one of those in associated with the Mount St. Helens systems, but I did
Mhm.
one in what's it called? Moonlands National Monument.
That sounds about right.
I believe that that's in Idaho. I'd have to go back. It's part of the
I don't know.
it's part of the large igneous province of the kind of western states, which is large igneous province is basically an ancient area where there's a huge amount of volcanic activity that emplaced a lot of igneous rock. And
Okay, okay.
a lot of like Idaho, Iowa, bits of Washington and Oregon. No, I'm sorry, not as far as Iowa, but Idaho, Washington, Oregon, and some of the other surrounding areas. A lot of
Hmm.
that is this part of this big igneous system.
Ooh, I didn't know that.
Yeah,
It's an
yeah.
I didn't know there was an interesting fact about Idaho. That's neat.
Yeah, yeah. And kind of going on fun museums that I would like to visit, there is a museum in Massachusetts that I've been hoping to try to visit at some point now for a couple of years. It's called MOBA, the Museum of Bad Art. It is a small collection of art that has gradually been collected where it is not merely art that is bad, but it is art that clearly time and effort went into producing, where the
Ugh.
artist's vision clearly exceeded their artistic ability by a wide margin.
Oh man.
They have a general rule that they spend no more than $7 acquiring any individual piece, but for certain exceptional examples, they are willing to go up to 300% of that amount.
Wow. Can you imagine slaving away at a work and it gets bought by the Museum of Bad Art?
I will say it's the museum does present itself as very much a celebration of artistic expression. It's kind of not exactly an outsider art type thing, but it is not merely laughing at art. It is simply celebrating human foibles.
Okay, I thought it was like the opposite of like, wow, you did a really good job. I'm putting this on the fridge. I thought it was the exact opposite of like, this is terrible. It goes on the shame fridge. Like,
I will say the museum has a really excellent YouTube page where they do periodic, short, generally minute-long videos displaying one of their pieces, and then have a curational voiceover listing the name of the piece, the acquisition history, and exploring some of the themes explored.
huh. So like it's actually a museum. Like it's
Well, it's very small, but they take themselves in their mission seriously.
yeah.
They have a
Okay, that's
rotating
cool.
gallery of material. They produce calendars of some of their collections. They have an excellent digitized online gallery if you ever want to see their stuff.
Oh, I'm Morrison. I'm going to.
Yeah,
I'd have to see what gets put up in the Museum of Bad Art.
yeah.
Ugh, that's
It's
beautiful.
also a very entertaining Wikipedia page, I'll tell you.
Ooh. Oh, you can go down the rabbit hole on
Oh yeah.
Wikipedia.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
So one question that I've talked with my previous interviewees about is the relationship between your field and media. And I'm wondering if you can think of examples where the kinds of things that you work with have been presented in some broader popular cultural context and what you like and dislike about how it's been presented in that way.
Um, you've seen Marvel movies,
Yes, yes,
right?
yes,
Yeah. Have you seen Avengers Endgame?
yes, yes.
Okay. Spoiler alert for anyone in the audience who hasn't seen a movie that came out over a year ago. There is a line where Tony Stark is trying to figure out time travel and says, tells the computer to find the eigenvalues of an inverted Mobius strip.
Yeah, it's like I vaguely remember knowing what eigenvalues and eigenvectors are from my calculus 3 class. And
That's multiplication.
yeah.
Like that's just tricky multiplication.
It's matrix multiplication, good sir.
It is matrix. Well done, well done. See, matrix like that. That gets me. I cannot watch Ant-Man. Just the stapling of quantum to
Yeah,
things
to
is
everything is just a generic explanation.
yes, to use a generic explanation doesn't quite satisfy for me. But I'm a stickler who actually knows quantum.
I will say I've enjoyed both Ant-Man movies. The physics is all over the place, and it is a
The
complete mess
physics,
in both
yeah.
movies.
See, and like when sci-fi takes a moment to really go into the sci and go,
Hmm.
all right, how would this work? How does this operate? It makes a more engaging world than if they just go, oh, that just happens. Why quantum?
Yeah, quantum physics.
Yeah,
Ooh,
ooh, it solved our writer's
spooky action at a
problem.
distance.
Ooh. Yeah, so that is the one thing that like you can get some examples of pop culture where it's just they just staple quantum on it and they go, don't question it, watch things explode. But then other times there are moments where there's some very interesting science happening and they just take a minor leap and it becomes very interesting about that. So definitely find some hard sci-fi. I appreciate that, where it makes sense. If that makes sense, where your intuition is going, okay, I see how that could work,
Yeah.
rather than just quantum.
Check. Moving
Yeah,
on.
check. So I'm in the second Ant-Man movie. The guy is Ant-Man's like, do you guys just say quantum in front of everything? And it's like, yeah, they do. Yeah, that's it. Like, but yeah, overall, science is cool. I'm glad that you're seeing scientists and you're seeing physicists in pop culture, even if it is just to explain why that guy is big, green, and angry all the time.
This is kind of an interesting tangent, but there is a YouTube music producer that I'm very fond of called Melody Sheep. And
Okay.
what he does is he takes, among other things, clips from famous scientific lectures, like by Richard Feynman, Neil deGrasse Tyson, a couple of other British and American physicists whose names I unfortunately can't remember offhand right now. But and he uses auto-tune to make songs about different science concepts.
Hmm.
And he has some very good ones about physics. And the last couple of his videos have been very astronomy based. Um,
Yeah.
but the Melody Sheep does some very interesting pop sci music. So
I mean, you can divide all physics majors into two groups. All right,
Mhm.
space kids and not space kids. And the space kids greatly overpower the not space kids. Right? Star Trek was a heck of a inspiration for a lot
I
of
will
kids.
say, somewhat relatedly, that geology is also a pretty good way to get into space. You know, a lot of astronauts were geologists.
Mm-hmm.
My research advisor, Dr. Shuhai Zhao, part of his funding actually comes from NASA exobiology grants.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Like I remember telling this to a guy. I was like, "Listen, if you want to get to space, astronomy is not the way to do it." I was like, go be a solid state physicist, figure out how to make computer chips for satellites, do something like that. Go be a geologist, etc. But yeah, it's a very lots of people want to go to space, and it's a very competitive, very tight field.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
yeah, there's sometimes you just won't get a job until someone dies,
Hmm.
and that's just the sad reality is that it's the field is very popular, but it's a very small, only the best of the best rise up. And even then, there needs to be an opening. So
Yeah,
it's a very tricky thing for people to get into.
yeah. But it's good that even if they are limited, there are still opportunities that allow us to really kind of push knowledge in
Oh,
human endeavor
absolutely.
directions.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. So go be scientists. The March for Science was great in, I think, 2017, I believe that was. Went to that, and that was great because it was lots of. Honestly, I was surprised. I thought there were going to be more scientists at the March for Science, and the fact that there weren't that many gave me a little bit of hope for the future.
Yeah, it's we often worry about the wide streak of anti-intellectualism and anti-expertise that kind of runs through a lot of the American psyche. So it's good to see that there are non-academics who are interested in promoting and heralding the importance of science.
Yes. Bill Nye hogged the stage, though. So that's unpopular opinion. I don't like Bill Nye. So this will be a fun comment section to read.
Yeah, I can turn comments off if you want.
No, it's fine. Bring it on. Bill Nye's not that great.
So now you've got your master's. Where do you see yourself going from here? That's always a question you get asked.
Yeah, so I am going to go move back up to Baltimore with my fiance, and I'm going to start working at Northrop Grumman.
Nice.
Working with them on some stuff and things in their advanced research department.
Nice.
And it will be very cool working on the forefront of what is being made. So
cool.
Stuff and things.
Well, Jack, I'm glad you could join us for this interview.
Morrison, thank you for having me. It was wonderful to talk physics to a rock guy and vice versa.
So say, Jack.
Morrison.
How many roads must a man walk before he truly understands the meaning of pasta primavera?
One, the Via Appia in Italy that led straight to Rome, I think. Because didn't that go all the way down Italy? So I feel like if you go down that road.
I don't know very much about that road, so this is news to me.
I took 4 years of Latin in high school, and it got me a good SAT score, and that's about it. But Via Appia was the big one, so I feel like if you walk down that one, that's the one road you can hit, and you'll be able to figure it out.
To understand truly pasta primavera.